Question. Hello, welcome to Telus Dark Naders. That's what it is. Dark Naders.
You've got a wonderful type of on
The Unity3D workshop. My name is John Renish. I'm making games professionally for about 14 years now. Whatever, too long. And I currently work with BioWare on unannounced titles, so we won't go into that. But please pre-order from us. Who here has played a video game? Wow,
Yay.
everybody in the class.
Awesome.
Who here has played Space Invaders? Wow, again, everybody in the class.
This is so much.
It's such a good class, 100%.
Times.
So, what was your name?
Dylan.
Dylan?
Yeah.
Perfect. Dylan, what's in Space Invaders?
Little space guys. and a
Little space guys,
ship.
right? Little ship,
You
perfect.
shoot.
Perfect. Those are what I would call objects. Ooh. I'm going to go into that. So, modern game design is all about object-oriented design and programming stuff like that. So everything in our game world, just like our real world, revolves around objects. So, what was your name?
Corey.
Corey, can you name an object?
Doesn't have to be in Space Invaders.
Any object. Tough one.
A brush.
A brush. Okay. Now, a brush is an object. All objects have intrinsic properties to them. Can you name a property of a brush?
It has bristles.
Perfect. It has bristles. A bristle count. How many bristles does it have? It also has a position, it has a weight, it has a size. Those are all properties of that object. Now, we are going to make an object. We're going to make our player object. If you would please go to the sprites folder, and we look at these wonderful sprites a friend of mine from BioWare, Corey Spencer, made. We have some sprites here. Please pick one to be your spaceship. Now, I can't tell you what to do. I highly recommend picking a ship to be your spaceship. If you want to use a bullet, I can't stop you. Now, you just dragged a ship onto the screen there. How does that feel? That is thousands of lines of code and millions of development dollars to do that. Because game dev is stupid expensive and hard, but thankfully this engine covers that basis for us. We have just made an object. This object has properties. It feels good, it feels good. This object has properties. Like I said, we have a transform up here, and Ali is currently renaming a player, which I recommend, so you keep track of it. It has properties, it has a position, it has a scale, it has a color. Ali, would you please adjust the scale to what you would like? Same thing with you guys. There's no right answer here. Please make the ship a good size for you. Could be, I would not go 100 by 100, but maybe like 3s. There is no wrong answer. There are just some answers that are better than others. So this object now exists and it has properties that we have defined. Great. We now have our brush that is 4 by 4 in red. Perfect. Now, I'm going to swap out brush for dog, because objects have two things about them. They have properties, they also have behaviors. So what's the behavior of a dog?
He runs.
Run, it moves. That dog can move. What's another behavior of a dog? You guys are being picked on so much.
He sleeps.
It sleeps. Another behavior. The dog rests. He can run, he can rest. Two great states, those are behavior states. Great. So objects have behaviors and properties. What is a behavior of our player in Space Invaders?
Moves and shoots.
They move and shoot. Perfect. That's, hey, 90% of the games that we make are moving and shooting games. So we're going to make this ship move because we want to get behavior. Could you go to the script folders, Ali, and say with you guys, I say Ali, I meant the group, and open up projectile movement. If you need to use the scroll bar here to adjust the size, fine, that's fine. Double click. Now, depending if you have Visual
They
Studio.
both have Visual Studio.
We have Visual, okay, so it'll take a second to load up.
So it's not going to look quite the same as this.
Yeah.
I think Visual Studio is open on their machines already.
Oh, he got mono, that's fine. Man, he's at Visual Studio. Great. So, coding can be very intimidating, I'm not going to lie to you. But we're going to have, there's very little code in this project because we're relying on the Unity built-in stuff. Built-in in Unity is the mono behavior. And as I said behavior before, this is behavior. Unity considers all these things to be behaviors, doer things that do stuff. We've got a keyword here called serialized field. Now there's a special keyword for Unity that says this value that comes after me, movement speed, is going to be adjusted. So we want this value to be adjustable because your ship might move faster than his ship. Hey, why not? And then we have a function here called update. Now I know there's a comment right above here, but I'm going to explain it anyway. Update is something that happens every frame. Now, assuming you guys know what a frame is, but I'll still explain it. Because the guy there, who's invisible, doesn't know what a frame is. I know, what a guy. A frame here is our update. That's how many times the screen is refreshed. It's like the game's heartbeat. So the faster the frame rate, the faster that heartbeat, so the more updates can happen. When the game is getting really overloaded, the frame rate drops, so we can only update so frequently. When there's nothing going on, it goes faster. So it's a little different. When we're running, our heartbeats go up. when we're exercising, how we go? Games, when they're exercising, their frame rate goes down. So it's not exactly right, but that's how it works. So this function is going to call automatically because Unity does it every update, every frame rate up. So we are going to make our player move. And as I said, we looked up there, we have scale. Our player, our game object, which is us, has a transform. And that transform is positions. We're changing that. So we're taking that position and we're adding to it this lovely math here. I know math. Allie, you went to projectile movement. Can you switch to player movement, please?
Is that a player? Oh, okay.
So, I just noticed that was the wrong file.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. We're translating our position on our player. We're calling a function that's built into transform to translate. Translate needs to move. We're moving by default to the right, which is positive on the x direction, and we're doing it by our movement speed. We also have this thing here called input. Now, I have been trying this entire night to think of a game that does not have input. Almost every game I can think of has some sort of input, otherwise it's a movie. Like that's the difference. So in this game, in Unity, input gives you a lot of stuff. Input's given to you for free. Again, it's really nice to have that stuff built in. Horizontal is left and right, obviously, and your keyboard has arrows on there. You can also use A and D as well as works well, but that is a left and right input. So what we're doing here is we're getting our input and multiplying it by the right direction, which is positive value. Now our input goes from -1 to +1, so we're going left, it flips it, and we're going this way. Very straightforward stuff. And the other part here is our time scale. And what that means is that we want this to be constant regardless of our frame rate. If we had a very fast frame rate, we didn't have that, our ship would move faster because the game's updating faster. If our frame rate went down, we would move slower. So we don't want that. So that built-in time function keeps that steady. So if you go back to the game, Allie, drag player movement, not projectile movement. Hi.
Hi. I was like, what's going on in here? Dylan's a staff member.
Well,
I want to.
you want that? I'm assuming that people have a future knowing.
Oh,
It's
okay,
fun.
that's-
It's more, they get more questions asking.
Yeah, that's true. You guys are gonna have the
This is our
best
sellout
game.
crowd.
Yeah, that's good, it's good. So if you drag that behavior onto our player, and then click on the player, you can see we're here. Now, if we were to run this game, Alec, and try to move, nothing would happen because we set a variable for player speed, but we never gave it a value. So what you can do is you can go in there and type a number you like. Again, a million's not a wrong answer, but it's not a good answer. And then if you run it again, and now try moving, it should work. And you can see it moving around. Now you can adjust this number while it's running, so you can see it live updating, but it won't save while you're running. So you can play with it, but you'll need to remember it later to adjust. So how are your ship? Your ship moving? Are you doing good?
Yeah.
So that's the movement. Our players also have another behavior, which is shooting. So we'll stop playing and we're going to look at player shooting. So we made one player ship there. That's enough. How many bullets do we need?
All of them.
All of them. We don't have a finite number of bullets. We need more than one. Well, okay, we can be past this, but let's assume we're going to need at least more than one bullet. So we can't just place them. Hi.
Welcome.
You guys think it? Yeah.
Come on in. Enjoy.
Do you want to catch them up real quick? And,
Yeah.
okay.
No, downstairs you guys have more room.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we've got 2 players in here.
Um,
Okay, so each of you.
So the player shooting here is very similar to what we did before. We have some parameters. Now this one does not have serialized field over it, which means that it's not going to be modifiable outside of it. So it's an internal only variable. And we're saying our fire delay, how frequently we can fire, and then our current delay, what our cooldown is between shots is. So this one's modifiable, this one is not. We also have this thing here, which is our game object projectile. So we need multiple bullets. So we're going to use this to be our stamp, our mold. We're going to use this over and over and over to make more bullets. So what happens in here, in our update loop, we're going to bring our time down. We're going to decrement our delay by the current time change. So our delay is going down and down. And then we have an if statement. Do you guys know what an if statement is? Can you guess what an if statement is? It says right above there, so I mean.
If it's not one thing, it's the other.
Yes, exactly. So this is, computers can't really make decisions, but they can do evaluations. They can't decide if it's time to shoot, but they can tell you whether or not the delay has gone down, which is, I know very pedantic, but when you're dealing with computers, that's really what's going on here. So what we're doing here is saying, if our delay is still positive, as it hasn't ticked down below what we're waiting, we cannot fire, meaning we're just going to end early in the term. So that's our delay there. We come down to the next one, we have another if statement. Now, because we're using keyboards here, not controllers, the default jump thing that's built into Unity, you can change, of course, is spacebar. If we had a controller, I would use the default word fire 1, which is the A button, but since we're not, I want spacebar. We're saying, if the player has the spacebar button pressed, do what's inside here. So you have to have both the timer go, and then the player has to also want to shoot. Those are two decisions that two evaluations that the code can make. And what does it do? It does instantiate. That is the function we call to create something. We are making that statement. We're making a new bullet in the situation. We're making a new bullet, and we're making a local variable for it. So just like up here we have a variable that we're going to adjust, this one only exists inside of this thing. So we're making a new bullet. We are setting its position. So we're making it somewhere in the ether. By default, it's like 0, 0, and we're putting it on top of us. We want the bullet to come out of us. We make it, we grab it, put it here. We set its layer, which we'll talk about later, and then we reset our fire delay. So once you shoot, you have to wait the full time again before you shoot. So if you go back to your project, and drag player shooting onto player, just like we did with movement, you should have another script down here. Now we can immediately set the fire delay to how fast we want to shoot. You put it to 0 or less, it's going to fire constantly when you put the space bar, because I don't have, my code's not smart for 0 or negative numbers, but you can fire as fast as slow as you want. That is your call as the game designer. But we don't have a projectile, right? We've made a ship, we've not made a bullet. So we're making our object. So,
I can go back over here now.
okay, we're caught up.
Everything might be cut out. What was the last step?
Player shooting.
Oh, we're at shooting.
All right, we're going to drop that on the board.
Just put it over here.
This way, just like you did the
On
one.
player?
Yep. And I'm not gonna select it.
That's okay.
All right, so click on player. Great, you're there. So we have a fire delay. We can set that, but we haven't made our bullet prefab. We don't know what our bullets are going to be. Now, technically, we could put our ship in there and make our ship shoot ships. That gets problematic very quickly. So what we're going to do is go back to our sprites folder, like we did with the ship, and pick something to shoot. Now, again, you can pick a ship. I recommend picking a bullet. I'm not going to tell you to make your game. And then drag it out onto the stage. And you can adjust the color, adjust the scale. So we can adjust the scale up here. You can adjust the color if you want. But find out you got time. All right, so Yaz made a very nice yellow bullet. And she has renamed it up here to be projectile. And you have it right there. She's renamed it.
Okay, I think they might need to help.
All right, so you dragged it. Oh, you're running.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah, you have to be actually not playing the game.
Everybody, it does. And could you actually click on the ship real quick? And then type in shooting, if you have to shoot. Got that? You got your response. Okay, so we have our bullet there, but again, that's just one bullet, and we need lots of bullets, because this is not a friendly game. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this here from our hierarchy tree there, that's what that's called, hierarchy, and we're going to drag it into our prefab folder. If you do it correctly, the one on the stage up there should turn blue, the name should turn blue, and that means in Unity terms that that's a prefab. And once you have it down here, as nice as that bullet is we made, we're going to leave it. We don't need it anymore. We don't need a bullet. We need our bullet prefab. We have to go that one? Great. So if you click on your ship, which is player, and then drag that prefab, you got, no, other way. Grab the prefab projectile, click on your player, drag the projectile into the spot here that says projectile none, give it a projectile. Boom. All right. Now if you run the game and push the space bar, you should start creating bullets. So if you run your game, just run. And then
Is your player shooting players?
yeah, so you're making bullets.
Shooting.
Wow.
But it's the wrong.
Exactly.
Alright.
You run, you space bar.
Which
you
script
make-
did you play?
Move over.
Projectile.
Oh, well, that's not. Well, you need player movement and you need player shooting, the scripts that the player has. And then the projectile should be part of the player shooting script. And then you'll end up with this wonderful thing that drops these bullets. And, you know, they're great, but they don't really do what bullets do.
So,
it's fine, because that's where we're at.
You know, all the bullets.
so we have a lot of bullets here, and bullets are a great object. But we have two things make up an object. Properties, which is, that's what a bullet looks like, that's how big it is, but also behaviors. We have not given this bullet behavior, so therefore it's doing everything we've told it to. It's doing exactly what we said so. So, if Allie would stop making bullets, thank you. We want to give it a behavior. So if you could open up the script, Allie, for projectile behavior. So go to scripts. Sorry, projectile movement. Boom, the one we looked at the beginning of the thing. So this is very similar to the player movement, but the one difference is that there's no input. Bullets don't get player input, so they're just going to move in their direction just like they're going to go. Now, one other key difference here is this bullet moves in its up direction. So, what's your name?
Cynthia.
Cynthia, could you please stand up?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm going to ask Cynthia to move to her right.
Okay.
I'm going to move my right. We have moved in our local space to our right. It's my right, her right. Let's pretend that's east, I don't know. So if I tell Cynthia to move east, we're both going to go this way. That is world space. Thank you. So these bullets need to move in local space, because if I shoot my bullet as a player, I want it to go up. But when I shoot it as the alien, I want it to go down. So that's why I'm saying move in its up direction. So once it's rotated, in this 2D space, locally up is always going to be forward on this. 2D is really hard to do in 3D. Up is going to always be my forward. I'm always going that way, because our bullets are oriented that way. So when I shoot it from me as a player, up is world up. But I shoot it from the aliens, up is going to be world down. And instead of being like messed up there, I just say just go on our forward. If we were doing in 3D space, this is a lot simpler because forward is forward. But unfortunately, we're 2D, so you use up. It drives me crazy too, but that's just how it is. So now if we go back to our game, go to our prefab folder, please, Allie. Click on our projectile. And we're going to add a component here. And we're going to add projectile movement. So just type in pro, boom, and click on it. And we're going to give it a speed. Again, you can set it whatever you want. Negatively bad, because this code will make the bullets fall backwards, and that's not going to help you. It's funny, which I appreciate. And now when you run the game, your bullets should shoot.
Okay, what am I supposed to be adding?
You're going to have projectile movement. So you have to just type in. Perfect. And then just give it a speed. Perfect. And then hit play and shoot. There you go. So we have, let's say, 30% of a game here. You've got a player with input. You can move the player around. You can shoot. 90 to 95% of the games you make in the industry is move and shoot games. So hey, you're getting pretty close there. All right. So we stopped the project from running. We are all going to do one other thing. Could you add one more component to here? Please add the timed lifespan. Or is that right? Time?
Yep.
Time lifespan. Okay. I won't go into the script just for the rest of the time, but this script, just like our fire delay, has a counter that just goes down. And as much as I love these bullets, they can't last forever. So we want these bullets to die after a certain amount of time. So I would just say like 1 or 5 or whatever, just a small number, because you don't want them to last forever. If you were making a professional game and these bullets never decayed, they would eventually eat up all your memory and crash. It won't happen here because we're making this tiny little project, but there, see her list up there? They keep going. She can't get any more. She's at the max number of bullets, so they will eventually decay. So that's just a little.
So how did you add the time lifespan?
Same way you click on your prefab, and then click. Each one.
Okay.
The resolutions aren't. This is making games on a laptop is very tough. All right. So, and then set the number to like 1 or 2. That doesn't really matter. Just anything better than infinite is good.
And don't make it 0.
Don't make it 0 or negative. Your bullets will instantly disappear. All right. So we've got a player. We've got bullets. We need Anyone?
Enemies.
Enemies, there we go. We need something to shoot at because, by golly, that's what games are. So, just like with the bullet and just like with the enemy or the player ship, go back to sprites and pick something to be our enemy. Again, I would recommend a ship, not a bullet, but hey, it's your game. We'll drag it out to our stage here. We will rename it from ship whatever to invader, so we know what it is. And we're going to adjust its size to be a good target to hit. So 7 and 3, 2 is the other one. Perfect. She made a nice little saucer, a little stretched out guy. That's fine. And she's changing the color. So we're going to make an invader like that. And just like before with the bullet, we want lots of invaders. We don't just want one. We want it's space invaders with an S. So we want invaders. So we want to make a prefab folder. So drag it from the hierarchy view into your prefab folder. And if you did it correctly, the name should turn blue. And then if it's there, you can delete it from the hierarchy. So you don't want that guy anymore. We have our custom. Okay.
Should we do that with the player too?
Yes, and we're doing the same thing with player. We're going to drag the player down there because it will make it easier in the future. And now we have 3 guys here, invader, player, and projectile, and you can also leave the player from the stage. So we've been here working for about a half hour, and if you're where we're at, we now have nothing. We worked this long to have nothing. Isn't that great? But we have building blocks. And as I mentioned at the start, we're all about objects here. We're all about object-based building block stuff. So we have 3 objects here. With the target, a player-controlled entity, and a bullet, we can do a lot of stuff. So, all games have rules. You played a game before. What game have you played?
Dragon Age.
Dragon Age. Oh, good choice. I like that brand. So Dragon Age has rules to it. So if you're playing Dragon Age, you expect certain things to happen. You expect monsters to be a certain place, or you can level up. Those are the rules of the game. And each game's rules are unique to it. Like if you're playing Dragon Age and then Allie came by with Ticket to Ride and rules, let's play Ticket to Ride in Dragon Age. Like, well, no, they're different games. They have different rules. So we're going to make rules for our game. And to do this, we're going to make something called game flow. And we're making a very simple version of it. And this is going to be the most complicated part. So this is like the third act climax here. So we're going to go up to game object. And we're going to make an empty object. Yep. So this thing is all about parameters. It doesn't exist. You won't see it. You'll never touch it. It'll never have a sense. It'll never exist. It'll just do work. It's a good work. So we're going to add a component to it. We're going to name it game flow, of course. Hit enter, or you want to save it. Okay, and then we're going to add a component to it. And we're going to add game flow to it. Now, don't be scared. We're going to get a lot of parameters when this pops up. But before we look at the script, I'm sure you guys can guess what goes into player prefab, and I'm sure you guys can guess what will go into enemy prefab. But we didn't do that right, so of course it won't. Because it won't take it. It won't take it because we didn't give it enemy prefab. All right, could you go click on the invader real quick, Allie? I need to add a component there. I forgot stuff. We're going to add enemy behavior to it, and we'll come back around to that too. Enemy behavior. Okay. So now if you go to game flow, you should be able to drop that invader on top of there. Oh, and yeah, please set the movement speed, a drop distance, and the bounds. The bounds is like 15.
Yes, it should be 15. It should not be smaller.
And then
We've
set
learned
the
that
projectile
back
with the same projectile to player. So we've added to our invader their behavior. We've set some parameters to it, and we've given it a projectile. Is everybody caught up that step? I missed it, so I apologize. Very good. Okay. So go back to game flow, and now you should be able to drag your invader into the enemy prefab there, please. Okay. So we know some stuff already. We can fill in some, get some ideas, but please open the script now. For the player game flow. Okay. So this is our largest file here. This is the most codey thing we have, and I'll go through it. But this is all familiar. Well, you came a little late, but it's all familiar in general. We have more serialized fields here. So we have a game object, just like we had with the bullet shooting. We told it, please make one of these when I want a player. So this player prefab is saying, when I ask for you to make a player, that's what it is. And then we also have a place where the player starts. So when we make one, where does it go? And then we have a local reference to it. Same thing with enemy. We say, hey, I want to make an enemy. What is it going to be? In this case, it's going to be this one right here. Now, you'll notice something different here between the player prefab and the enemy prefab. Instead of being a game object, we're using enemy behavior. Now, game object is the basic, most basic thing that Unity understands. It's just a thing. We don't want a thing because we need it to be enemy. So we decided in this case we want our prefab to be an enemy behavior. So when we drag an option on there, it didn't work at the start because it didn't have that script. Because we're like, no, I want enemy behavior and try to put something that's not. So if I was to say I wanted a dog, I can take any dog, German Shepherd, Labrador, whatever, but if you try to put a cat in there and say, nope, not a dog, can't have it. So we want it to be an enemy to work with it. We have some stuff like how many enemies we have, where they start, how far apart they are, just basic parameters like that. And then we have one of my favorite things in game development is collection. I cannot remember more than 3 things at one time. I really wish I had a list that could do that for me mentally. This is going to keep track of all of our elements, because if you've played Space Invaders, you know they are not independent. They all move as a group. So they all move right, they all move down, they all move left. The Space Invaders are a solitary fighting machine together. So we're going to treat them as one collection of objects, not individual objects. And then just like in the shooting script, we have a delay and a current delay, so we have that timing mechanic for it. Another function that Unity gives us by default is start. So just like update and has every frame start happens at the start. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. We are going to, at the start, make a player object. So we're going to instantiate our players to make them. And we're going to set their position to where we set our player start position. Who here is familiar with a for loop, or can probably guess what a for loop is? Okay, so with the if statement, we say, if this condition is true, do the following code once. Just do the code below it once. With a for loop, we're doing it for that many times. So we are making a grid of aliens. So we have our x and y values for how many aliens we have. So when we build our thing, we're going to say, do this x number of times or y number of times to make our aliens. So we're going to go for every row and then again for every column, make an enemy in position and put them in our rows. So that's what our for loop is. It's going to go through multiple times, and every time until our count is going to make one. So we're going to make a bunch of enemies to make our grid. So that's what our for loop is. It's going to be multiple run-throughs of this code over and over and over again. So if we go back to our game, why don't we set a player start at -3y, please, Ellie? Or -4, great, perfect. And then how many enemies do you want? Now I can't tell you the right answer. I recommend less than 1 million, but Allie's going with 5 by 3. The resolution is not that great. So she's making a grid of 5 by 3 aliens. She's making them start -2 to the left, maybe a little bit. Perfect. And then how far apart they're going to be, Allie? Like 1 and 1, half and half? So, oh, okay. They're really high up. Perfect. Now, I don't know how big you made your aliens, so your values will be, your spacing is going to depend on how big you made your aliens. And 2. And then how quickly do the aliens shoot? So the last workshop, you looked at that value 0, and the aliens just rained down hellfire. I would recommend like at least a 0.5, you know, whatever feels good. Allie got 0.5, perfect. So now if we run the game, your aliens are very high up, Allie. Could you lower them a little bit?
Why?
Well, could you make that like a 0, just so we can see them? Make it be higher? No? Make it like a 0? Okay, fine. 1's good enough. All right, so she's got her aliens, and they're kind of off the edge there, but she now has a grid of aliens. Does anybody else not see a grid of aliens? Yeah, okay, that's fine. All right, so,
Sure, I'll never give that up. I think it's good.
So you just added it to the line. So any figures there. 15. Okay. So now we go back to here. We can now set your invader as our enemy. Okay, there's a bunch of them there, but you made your alien to a big. Okay, so you might want to space them out and make them smaller. And that's fine.
I forgot to write. How many 2 players?
Oh no!
I know what I did wrong.
That's fine, that's fine. All right. Okay, so first off, we don't want any of these yet. We have we're going to make our own copies. We're going to do that. And our game flow here. All right, we should be good now. Yeah, let's try that. Oh, they're just really high. So if we go back to here, let's just set this. Oh, you come at 8, yeah. So like, we'll just put it there. You can adjust it.
Did you not make them bigger or anything?
There you go.
When you put your,
And I want to do the other side.
when you put the invader down, did you resize it?
Okay.
Oh, there you go, there's a black.
So,
Or black.
does everybody have a grid of aliens right now?
Yes.
So once again, we have our aliens, and we have our ships and all that, but they're not doing anything. Now we gave them behavior, but this behavior is a little different because they are not moving. So could you stop running and then load up the enemy behavior script? We'll take a quick look at that. Now up until this point, all of our scripts have been native to Unity. They all run on an update loop, stuff that Unity gives us. But this one is a little different. We've got some parameters that are all very similar. We have projectile, we have movement speed, all the stuff that we did for player movement and player shooting. Okay. So what's different here is we have some functions that we define. We've got a public function called move, a public function called change direction, a public function called shoot. Now, earlier we mentioned an object called a dog. We're all familiar with dog. And dogs have properties and behaviors, but they also have stuff we can make them do. You can teach a dog to sit or roll over and fetch. So like this, our aliens, our invaders, are kind of like dogs in that sense, where we can tell them move, tell them shoot. So we can give them ability, we can tell them to do stuff. And that's why they're public. Without that public keyword, you can't tell them something to do. So this one relies on something else to tell them how to work. Because the aliens move as a group, we want to be able to do that as a group. So that's why they aren't doing it. They have behaviors, but no one's controlling them. So if you could go back to the game flow, please, Ellie, and then scroll down. We're going to want to uncomment this block of code here, 42 to 59. And if you are on mono, which looks like that, it's Control or Shift Alt C. You're in Visual Studio, so. Oh.
No, it's Control Alt C. I think.
No, it's for her. For mono's Control Alt C.
I am a mono. What did I do wrong? You said shift. Whoa, I just
I'll come back. Control Alt C, go. And you're in Visual Studio, so yours is Control K, Control U.
Okay.
Control K, then Control U?
Yep. There you go, perfect. You're still loading up. All right, so you did it, right? And then make sure you save the file with Control S.
I did that once. Just click somewhere else.
Visual Studio is very slow.
That was what I did the first time.
Okay.
Okay, just click on things, maybe it'll fix itself. Finish.
Here. Save.
Control S. All right.
Yeah, Control S.
All right, so we'll look at this code here a little bit. So this is our update loop because our game flow is going to control our invaders. So we have one thing controlling all invaders because they don't need to think individually. So the first thing it does is it cleans up any ones that we've shot. So when we shoot them, if they've gone null, we just get them on the list. We don't care about them anymore. Then we do our loop here. Now this is a for each loop. Now just like a for loop that says do it to a count, for each says do it on everything in this collection. So it's very handy because I don't know if there's 7 there, I don't know if there's 100 in there, I don't care. I just want you to do something to all of them. And what that's going to be is that enemy, we're going to do the move function. So we're looking at every single alien and saying move, 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 move. We're telling them all to move. And they return a value true or false, which is doing this here is the OR operator. So it's saying if any of these have been true, it stays true. So once we get one true, it's always true. And if that's true, we go through again and say, okay, everybody change direction. So as soon as one alien has reached too far, they all start going back up. And then finally down here, we have our shoot delay. And what this is, just like with the player shooting, there's got to be a timer for how quickly the aliens can shoot. And we pick a random one. So we have this function here called random. It just gives us a random number between 0 and how many enemies we have. So we look at our collection and say there's 7, great. Pick one out of this list and make them shoot. Because in Space Invaders, we kind of shoot kind of randomly. They don't all shoot at once. They don't shoot in a pattern, just randomly. So now if we go back and run our game, the alien should now move and shoot. Theoretically, fingers crossed, hopefully. They're moving. Are they shooting, Ellie?
Yeah.
All right. Moving and shooting?
No.
Are you moving and shooting? All right. That's fine. All right. So let's look at script file there.
And don't feel bad if things go wrong,
That's-
like, that's game development.
Yeah.
It's supposed to go wrong. Also, you'll notice that the shooting doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So, for some
It
reason,
added
you got the
some
script.
bullets.
Oh, wrong spot.
There's
Looks like they're
colors.
playing a very bad game of catch.
Yeah,
So make sure that
it's very bad,
otherwise
they're
you
not,
should be-
they're not catching
Are
things.
you moving and shooting?
Now what? I'm moving, but not shooting.
Are they shooting or are you shooting?
Oh, I can shoot sometimes.
Sometimes.
Well, depends on
When
your
I
time
push the
delay.
button.
Okay, so if you could just stop playing. It always sounds bad when I say that. Click on your invader in your prefabs directory.
Do do do
Okay,
do.
that's fine. You didn't give them a projectile, so they don't know, they have nothing to shoot.
They
Again,
don't deserve it.
Don't make them shoot aliens, don't make them shoot players, have them just shoot bullets.
Oh. Oh, now they're shooting me. How dare they?
Okay, yeah, that was all. You're fine, yeah. Not that one, that one.
This is very intimidating.
Yeah, fine. Control K, and then Control U. Perfect. Save that file, Control S. And if you go back now and run, they should move and shoot. So, we have a very pacifist game here, right? Everybody's moving and shooting, but no one's taking any damage. How lovely world we have built. We're going to change that. Could you please go to your prefab folder? Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay. Select all three of your prefabs, your invader, your player, your projectile, or we call it the mother, the ball,
Fred.
and the thread. Okay, select all three. So,
Oh, my aliens are not shooting.
okay, well, we'll get back up. Click on your invader. You do not give them anything to shoot. So just drag that onto that. What in this? Anyway, okay. So just like in the real world, we can't tell the bullet hit something unless there's actually physics. Who loves physics?
Woo!
Yeah, all right, we got a physics area over here. So we're going to get physics with that. So the first thing you need to add for physics is a rigid body. I know it sounds dirty, but it's just a term for something that exists in the world. So please click on Add Component with all three selected, don't forget, and just type in R rigid body, and we want a rigid body 2D. We're working in a 2D game. Perfect. And there's no gravity in space or not enough to affect us, so please set the gravity scale to 0. So add a rigid body 2D, set the gravity to 0. We also want to add a collider because we want to define the size and shape of this. So please add a collider 2D to it also.
Circle collider 2D.
Yep. Perfect. And you don't need to adjust it. So now if you run your game, you'll notice something different.
Circle.
They should start wiggling and jiggling around.
They are. They're all over the place. They look like they're drunk.
Oh my gosh, there's bullets
So
everywhere.
set the gravity scale to 0. Now if you run.
They're avoiding my bullets. That's how dare
That
they?
makes this game more fun. More challenging when everything.
They may have pushed off the street. So
A lot.
So it looks really weird, right? Because what's happening right now is we have no rules about collision. They can collide, but we aren't telling what to do with it. So we have nothing but, right now, they're kind of like a ball pit. They're all just smashing across it. There's no rules. It's just physics going everywhere. We don't want that. It's fun to watch, but we don't want that. So we want to add one more thing to it. What do we want them to have when they collide? We want them to destroy. We want bullets to kill stuff. So if you could please add one more component to here, which is destroy on collision. Now, I won't go into the code on this to save some time, but I bet you can figure out what destroy on collision script does. That's right, it destroys on collision. So we'll add that on there. Now you run the game. As soon as something shoots, it dies. Which is not great, because we want to be a little more finesseful on it. Because everything right now, as soon as I shoot a bullet, I put it on top of me, which kills myself. So all these aliens are shooting themselves, the player's shooting himself. That's not good. That's not what we want.
Huh.
So there's one more thing we need to do to make this a little more sensical, is we're going to adjust the physics so that only certain things apply to certain things. Are we on the same page?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
My guys are kind of weird.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
that's
because they're
what's
colliding and they're
Oh, they
flying.
just, okay.
I'm going to be honest with you all, I've been setting you up for failure constantly. I'm constantly giving you bad advice, and I don't even feel bad about it. So we're going to do one more thing. We're going to adjust our physics settings. So please go to Edit, and go to Project Settings, and Tags and Layers. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add a layer for players, and a layer for invaders. So just, or the ball and the thread, whatever works for you, but just layers that you can recognize. So we've added 2 more layers. Everybody caught up on this part? Good? Okay. Please go now to the Edit Project Settings and go to Physics 2D. Project Settings, Physics 2D. Boom. And if you scroll down, depending on your resolution, you're going to see this little grid down here. And this is our collision? It's been a long night. This is our collision matrix. And what's going on here is you can see there's a bunch of check marks, except invaders, and invaders have no check mark, meaning they do not collide. Same thing with players and players. They don't have a check mark, they don't collide. So what that means is that if I create a bullet, if you remember way back when I said this layer thing matters, when the bullet's created, the player says, set your layer to be my layer. So if I'm a player, you are now a player bullet, we will not collide anymore. So if we go back to our prefabs, click on invader, click their layer there, set them to invaders, click on your player, set your layer to player, and now run the game. Are you getting shot too quick?
I think I took too many bullets.
Oh, I just killed
Like a
myself.
really bullet.
You might well
I fail at my own
So
game.
why don't you stop that? Go to your game flow, just in the hierarchy,
Oh, God, okay.
and your fire rings. So first off, remove that.
Oh, I have to.
Turns out I'm good at
You
that.
remove all of those.
Well, you just need to change the settings and then you'll be very good at the game.
I shoot lots of bullets.
I will
You
never
just
die.
expect.
So your shooting delay is 0, so they will fire constantly.
Ah.
Try 1, just to see. Did you die? Did they get you?
I don't know.
Oh, you got shot.
Uh-huh.
So why don't you
Oh,
start it over?
I got hit even though they're really good.
All right, try it again.
It's slower, I expect.
Oh,
So
darn
you
it.
shoot fast, yeah. But they're moving very, very fast, so they come down at you really quick. Did they get you again real quick, or did you die right away? Okay. Did you put that there?
See, there's lots of things in this game you can customize.
Oh, you missed a step. Did you go to edit? Go to project set? You need to have a layer in there for player. How's it going over here, guys? Good? Are you firing at you?
I've almost
Oh,
won.
I just died right away.
Yeah, I killed all the aliens.
Well, okay,
Turns
you
out my
can
ship
do
is-
that.
my
but
ship is
you can
very
slow
attracted
ball
to
down right now.
Okay.
Changing your
Oh, that's
footing.
okay.
That's why I made a tiny little pink ship.
And you just,
Called
movement speed 10.
Tiny little thing.
Alright, so you got that, great. Now if you go to the top there. There you go, he's on invaders,
So
players.
this is pretty much the
So you're good.
game.
So you-
So if
you
you
run.
want, you can save this and email it to yourself. And, try to get some more later.
Your ship can only go one
It's funny,
direction.
I've had Unity on my computer for like 2 years and
I mean, sorry, it's like, I can only go
Now
sideways.
Right,
you
right,
have a
that's
reason to
basically-
use it because you can customize your video.
I think I've got too many.
But yeah, you can totally save this stuff to your
Well, then you
email account or to, if you have a random USB drive sitting around, I'm sure you could, USB it yourself, but that would involve having a random USB drive with you.
Oh, you know what probably.
a bunch down in my office somewhere.
Yeah, the easier solution is probably not.
Yeah, that's something to do this week.
And if you don't know how to email it to yourself, then, you can both tell him. He has a Twitter and an email that you can contact him at. Both have his name, so it's
It's funny, but let's make this a little smaller. What's happening is it's so
No
big,
spaces.
it's spawning on top of something.
the name on the sheet.
Saving it so I can use it.
Yeah, so your project is named Telus Project Session 3, or at least it should be,
Yeah.
and it's on the desktop. So the folder, it's called Telus Project Session 3, that's the one you're going to want to run to yourself.
There you go. I know it's a little smaller, but I just wanted to get on my screen. So, one thing one thing I hope that you've all seen throughout this, with me leading off that cliffs and all that, is that mistakes happen a lot, and we never get these values right the first time, even professionally. So there's lots of tweaking. Do you close yours?
No, I was just showing them where their
Oh.
project was, so you know.
And there's other stuff that we could add to this, like we could add multiple lives. That would really help, wouldn't it? If you could die and respawn. We could add different projectiles for the enemies. So if you want to add projectiles for the enemies, if you have some time, Alec, could you stop playing? I know it says that. All right, so if you go to our prefabs here, and click a projectile and right click on it, it duplicates. Can you not duplicate that?
Doesn't look like it.
Can I look? I thought there was a duplicate.
Might be too hard.
Okay.
We'll leave it.
So we're going to rename that. So name that projectile 2. And then drag it down into.
That's fine.
So what we did was you dragged the projectile up there. We renamed it projectile 2. Now drag it back into your prefab. So now projectile 2, so you can delete that one again. On the stage, yep. And now if you take this one, you can now adjust its speed to be really slow. If you want the aliens to be really slow. So you can adjust its movement speed to like 5 out.
Where is that?
Right there. You missed it. Oh, movement speed. 5. Yep. And then if you go to your invader, you can now drag projectile 2 where it says projectile. And now we made another projectile that the aliens fire and the players shoot a different projectile. So now they shoot really slow bullets and you shoot faster.
Really scary.
So now of course you still crash into them, but that's fine.
I also made them move slower.
But that's very important. There's a couple things that I hope everybody takes away from this as we coast into the end here, is that game development never gets it right the first time, or the second time, or the third time. We learn a lot from we learn a lot from iterative design. So we do something, we test it, we try it again. We don't know these numbers. We're professionals, we have good guesses, but we still tweak and tweak and tweak and patch and patch and patch to adjust these numbers. But we have fun while doing it, so the laughs are helps.
They make it to the bottom.
The additional, you got it?
Never die.
I killed all the.
Nice. So another thing to keep in mind here is that when I mention object stuff, it's not just the funny jokes with dogs and stuff. It's actually because that's very important. Even in our AAA games, we still have a player object. We still have a gun or a sword object. We still have a bullet or a fireball object that we create when we want it. So these basic building blocks are still the same things we use to make more complex games. It's just we have a few more properties and a few more behaviors, but this is the foundation that moves up and down. You mentioned the player only moves left and right. If you were to go into your player movement script, you said horizontal. If you were to copy and paste that and change right to up and horizontal to vertical, you would then be able to move in all directions. So little tweaks would quickly be able to snowball and make a different game. And you would take Space Invaders and turn it into Robotron if you did that. You know, you can do stuff like that to see the evolution from game to game to game over the years. Where it's, oh, we added one more thing, we added one more thing, we added one more thing. So games evolve, so do our designs. And by looking at these basic building blocks, we've made, you know, not a super complex game, but, you know, a lot of game is there for 45 minutes. I also hope that you come away with us, you know, not too intimidated. Now, I want everybody to make games, and this one of the greatest things, the greatest jobs to have. If you come out to it like, oh god, that sucked, fine. But hopefully it takes some of the scariness away from it. And also, Unity is a great editor, a great engine for starting out and learning. There's tons and tons of tutorials like the one we went through here, lots and lots and lots of assets and available resources for it. So there's a lot of things available for people who want to get into games to learn and progress and stuff like that. So I just want to ask real quick, because we have a little more time. We added the projectile. What else would you add to the game to make it better? What would your next step here be?
I would like my guy to be able to move different directions
Sure.
so he can get away from the grid and invaders.
Sure. So you would go into that player movement script and add that vertical to it. What would you add to the game?
Other aliens that are not that guy?
Sure, yeah. You can have an alien that comes by and drops a power-up. That would work too. What would you add to the game? More explosions?
The dog that eats the aliens.
A dog eats the aliens. Perfect. That's a little bit more advanced. The dog lesson comes next time. But yeah, those are all things that we can add and adjust and make this game your own. And I think that's very important to know that it's just take one more step. Start with something very basic, and just add one more step at a time, because it's very difficult. If you went and said, I want to make the next Mass Effect, you look at it and go, that's a billion lines of code. You go, well, what if I just made a game where you romance aliens? Well, that's a little easier, yeah, so are there any questions? Did I would really appreciate if you left feedback and stuff for it, but that's my spiel. We have a little extra time, so if you want, I can show you how to do the player movement stuff.
That's okay, I really have to go find my friend.
Okay. And I invite you to take the pamphlets home with you.
And feel free to email your project
Yeah, you can email your project
You can
to
totally
yourself.